This is our 200th episode. Over the past 3 years, we have proudly guided thousands of people just like you, helping you avoid costly mistakes by becoming educated first home buyers. Now, today we're going to recap some of your most popular episodes.
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Meighan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together, we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Well, today we are celebrating our 200th episode, and I have to say, what a milestone. And
Do you remember back when we started talking about doing this, Veronica? And we weren't even thinking about a podcast at the time. I think you introduced that like after we'd even created the course.
Yeah. And then, so 2021, we started this podcast. 2020, we created the course. And we must say it's great to catch up with you every week. And what we're going to do in this episode is sort of pull out, based on the statistics of you listeners and what you listen to the most, we are going to cover off our 10 most
10 or 11 roughly
popular or most common interested.
Most downloaded.
So the most downloaded episodes, we're going to give you a quick snapshot. So this is like a shortcut to all the 10 most popular, 10 or 11 or give or take. What a rambling intro. Anyway, great to see you again, Meighan. But before we get into the actual...
Nice to see you too. Every week we get to catch up like this. You in Sydney, me in Brisbane.
And you know what? We talk a lot off air as well, guys. So you get a bit of both here. You get a bit of our banter as well as the facts and the information and the intel. But before we get into the episode, there is on the video in the screen behind Meighan, a really interesting little, it looks like a Brisbane, a Queenslander. Very cute.
Look, this was called the Bluey House. And look, for those who aren't on Pluto, you would know Bluey is a Brisbane production that was created in Brisbane and is largely recorded in Brisbane, created in Brisbane. And this was a house that someone was selling in Brisbane a couple of years ago, and they used the Bluey analogy and sort of turned the house into a similar kind of house that Bluey and his family, her family have.
So it was inspired by Bluey the cartoon.
Inspired, and it was actually on Airbnb for a little while.
Wow.
So before they had to probably turn it back into not being Bluey's house because it wasn't associated with Bluey at all.
No, very pretty.
But cute.
Yeah.
Cute.
I would have done a Peppa Pig house or a maybe a Charlie.
But that's not Brisbane.
Charlie and Lola. I don't know, being Sydney and all, but like Bluey came around after my daughter was, I think, beyond that. It's fairly recent.
And it's a whole different world for people who have, preschool age, prep sort of year one age. It is a real world that they are immersed in. And what I love about Bluey is that it's Australian content with Australian slang and Australian accents. And there's, I think it's now the most watched or most streamed program in the US as well. So it's become, there's people in the US saying dunny and
that's cool.
Sorts of Australian slang.
That's seriously cool. Because you know what? I mean, here we are. We're just bantering and not actually getting into the content. But, you know, do you ever do Wordle?
Yeah, I love Wordle.
Yeah. And so I actually subscribe. So there's these other puzzles in there. And like if you ever try to do the crosswords, or there's another one called Connections, quite often the questions are unanswerable unless you're actually American, because you just don't get it. And I reckon it'd be
terms.
interesting to see if Dunny comes up in one of those. I'll keep an eye out. Yep. Dunny and Bluey. All right.
So that's the Bluey house.
So let's hit you with the really important key points from our most downloaded episodes. We've at this point of time, how many downloads have we had, Meighan?
197,000 downloads.
Wow.
Now that is, given we've got a very, very niche, specialised area of focusing on helping first home buyers only, not investors, not upgraders, but with a really tight focus on first home buyers. I think the amount of people who are really wanting to soak up that knowledge and learn the right way to do things is really inspiring. I feel so proud of that.
Yeah, we definitely should be proud of that. And you know what? We probably should let everyone know, really, it's gone from being a side hustle to a bit of a passion project in a way. If you were looking at like true business smarts, I don't think either of us would be doing this, but we clearly have a lot of passion for it, don't we?
I just want to stop people from making really bad mistakes.
We do.
At the end of the day. And people going along, I wish I knew how to do that back before I bought my first house. You can know how to do it.
Exactly.
Now, within those episodes, so 200 episodes, we had a little breakdown of the different categories. So you and I have a bit of an idea of what we're going to do each week. We've got a bit of a plan. But it can also be a bit topical too. So sometimes we think we're going to do an episode on something and something comes up in the meeting and we go, wow, we really need to get that out there. We need to talk about it.
Yep.
So we've had 11 student case studies. So that's students that actually did Your First Home Buyer Guide, the course, and then have gone on to purchase properties. Not every student, as you can imagine, a lot less than actually are happy to do a podcast.
Most
and I
are
completely
really
respect
shy.
that. Yeah. Totally respect that. But when a student does share their story, there's so many extra learnings and some aha moments that I think are really important for people to take the benefit of and feel like, well, I haven't got to make that mistake now.
100%. And we've also got 11 general case studies in there as well. And look, we do learn through stories and we remember stories more than we remember facts. So that's where these case studies are really useful. And people can identify and go, oh, well, I made that mistake, or I would have done that, or that's me, or good, I'm glad I now know what that person did. So I don't actually do what I was about to do, which was the complete opposite.
Yeah. And familiarity, I think, too, when someone's out and about and they're doing something and it sort of jumps back into their head, oh, I remember that person who said when they went to, an inspection, they did this and they wish they hadn't. I can almost hear that. And some of our students actually say, it's all like I've got the two mums on my shoulders.
Yeah.
Like, they're in my ear going, C grade. No. Or, don't forget to check, don't forget to ask this question.
Would the mums like this? What would the mums say? That's so cute.
Can I remind you that we're 200 episodes in. I actually had a different background. I completely forgot I was going to do it. I feel like I need to break the video and put it in.
And put a
when
birthday
we
cake
started, I had short hair and you had long hair. Look at us now.
That's quite funny. Switch. All right. Of all those episodes, 197,000 downloads, 6 episodes dedicated to strata. And it's an interesting breakdown because I would have thought in my brain we'd actually done more than that. Now, we do talk about strata in a number of different episodes, but these are 6 that were dedicated to buying strata.
Yeah, and I think that's representative of a lot of first home buyers, that they are actually often in that space from a price perspective.
Yep. Particularly in Sydney.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Absolutely. So important to really get in-depth knowledge about that. 14 have been about money, and that's anything from mortgage strategy to saving for a deposit to LMI to a lot of other topics that people have found really, really interesting. And it's a really big part of the lead up to buying a property is getting that money sorted out. And of course, it's step 2 in the 10 steps of Your First Home Buyer Guide is money. So making sure that that's right. So we've got 14 episodes in there dig back through, have a listen if you're at that early stage.
Absolutely. Now, 6 on due diligence, and maybe we need to beef that one up because due diligence is
due diligence is
important.
through everything. Yeah, well, as you say, like with Strata, like we talk about these things in almost every episode, but dedicated episodes on due diligence. But of course, we talk about it all the time in just about every episode.
Well, we do. And look, the thing is too, that and like we say at the end of pretty much every episode, is that we only scratch the surface in these episodes. And due diligence is a real classic example of where we just scratch the surface. And we just want to raise your awareness of that due diligence needs to be done, and some of the areas in which if you don't do it, you could really make huge errors, because we've got an entire module, one of the 10 steps is property evaluation, which is all about due diligence and pricing a property and doing all the checks and that you need to do to be confident that when you're moving forward buying that property, that you're not buying a lemon or you're not buying something with a huge looming problem that you could have known about. So we do harp on that a lot.
Yeah, and it's what's in all sort of due diligence. Nothing's going to be perfect, and we do always talk about that. It's about uncovering everything so that you go into it with eyes wide open and saying, all right, I know that issue. This is how I'm going to fix it, or this is how much it's going to cost. I know that before I'm committed to the purchase. It's not going to be a horrid surprise afterwards.
Yeah, very true.
Now, we've had 7 episodes on different locations.
Yeah.
So that's interviewing people maybe from Melbourne, Cape Acos, or Orange. When we had Matt on,
Ward, we've had done regional. We've done regional
Sunshine
Queensland,
Coast and
New South Wales,
Gold Coast, New South Wales. So these are all different locations. I've done,
and we also did a series which was the different rules and regulations in all the different states and territories. So that's sort of that's another little series.
Yeah.
Which is really important.
It is because we, in trying to create a course and some guidance for first home buyers, of course, it would be too narrow to just go for one state, even though most of the first home buyers probably are in Sydney or New South Wales. And we sort of see that in our numbers too, in our listenership and also in our student numbers. But we want people to know that, you might be a first home buyer in Sydney and get to know that, but you need to be aware that if you move to Melbourne or your family's moving to Melbourne, it's different. You need to make sure that you know the different rules in different states and be aware that what you know from one state is not, parents might have bought in New South Wales, but if you're buying in Queensland, you're not listening to their advice on how to do it. You really need to know that there is a difference.
And there is a cohort of first home buyers that does buy in a different location because of affordability and actually moves and relocates. So, and that's just so typical that we often in our own little worlds, we don't know what we don't know. We just assume that everything happens as it does here where I am now, but not necessarily the case, but usually not the case.
Yeah, and God, there's legislative change all the time. I mean, we could do an entire episode on that, but gee, yawn, no one would download that one. In Queensland, we go through a raft of tenancy law reform at the moment, and then there's changes to vendor disclosure that are now set to come in August 2025.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's a little way away, but some good things coming. But in the meantime, you have to be really good at your due diligence. So understanding that. We've also done 9 episodes answering people's questions.
Again, I
love those.
I would have thought that was a lot more. But yeah, we do love those episodes. So keep your questions coming in. And in fact, now we've sort of got the Facebook group alive. So we get really good questions that come via that, and we make episodes out of that. But people will email us their questions as well, and we feel free to. In fact, we encourage, if you actually download any of our free resources, we continue to send you all these little things that you need to know about property. And when you finally covered off all of those things, there's probably a year's worth of emails there, little things, videos. At the very end, we go, actually, at the very beginning, we say, what's your most challenging question right now? And we do actually get some really good questions that way.
Yep. Love it. 6 avoidable disaster stories, Veronica.
These are sort of my favourites.
You like these ones?
I love these. So this is where you find there's, it's usually on a current affair or some sort of, some
news
really
story or something
tabloidy type newspaper, this terrible story that's befallen a property purchaser or property owner at some point. And what we like to do is deconstruct these to work out, well, these often are very terrible stories, but what could they have done before landing themselves in the hot water. What was avoidable? How much of this was discoverable? It's a little bit like, do you watch Air Crash Investigation?
No.
Well, I used to when I had Foxtel.
I think if I put that on, my son would never fly in a plane before.
It actually, weirdly enough, it's actually increased my confidence because of the rigor that they go through, and then mostly things change. But anyway, we could do a whole topic on that, but not quite related to property.
That's way outside our wheelhouse.
Not. No, but there are parallels, I'm sure. Anyway, the point being that when I think I'm the air crash investigator, and I'm going into this disaster story and thinking, well, really, what could have been made better afterwards, and that's what we're trying to bring to you as a listeners to say, well, okay, if I'm gonna fly this property buying plane, I'm really pulling this metaphor.
Analogy is getting really long,
stretching it out there, but if I'm going to go and do this, and I could avoid that awful disaster because I actually did A, B, and C and did it all in the right order,
I saw the flag. I saw it because I was aware of it. Yeah,
that's exactly right. That's why we're here to help you. So that's why I love those stories.
Absolutely. Look, and there have been many, 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 many other helpful tips and tools along the way that we've shared in those 200 episodes. And I love that people go back. They seem to go back to the start. And, new listeners who come in maybe at episode 197, and they go back and they start from the start so that they're actually collecting the knowledge right from the start. And I think that's why, not surprisingly, the most downloaded episode is episode number 1. What is your first home buyer guide?
Which is amazing.
It is. It's amazing. And it's a number 1 by far. But, I think that's because people go, well, what in the world are these women on about? These old women that are trying to give us advice.
We're not old. Older.
Not to be your mum, and that's okay.
We're just older. Yes, wisdom and experience. All right, and then in no particular order, these are our most downloaded, right? Our annual how to prepare to buy each year. So if you go back to episode 100.
These are right up there.
Yeah, which just shows that we're going to have to do another one for 2025.
Absolutely.
So keep your ears peeled for that one.
Yeah. Look, if you subscribe, you'll get it straight into your inbox in December.
You will. So make sure you subscribe. You could even go back to 156 and you think, well, how much, now that we're 3/4 of the way through the year, how much of that was relevant? And actually that will give you a lot of confidence in what we say. We're not making predictions.
We do not
make predictions.
We do not predict. That is not what that episode is about. It's actually looking at what some of the key indicators are in different markets, and we don't say what we think interest rates are going to do. We simply make observations. So it's about, what you can rely on, not what you can pretend to know, because that's definitely not what we do.
No, because the thing, and what's so important here is that we can't fight the market. Stuff will happen out there, but we can only control what we can control. And every year we want to get you really focused on what you can control to get yourself set up to buy that year, if that's what you want to do. And next one is
most downloaded. Well, it's not in order. Okay, so this is just just we randomly pulled these, not in any particular order, but episode 9, which was the interview that we did with David Johnson, was the importance of a borrowing strategy. Now, I wouldn't have anticipated that would be one of our highest downloaded episodes, but it is, and people obviously really want to know more about borrowing and borrowing strategy than just jumping online to a bank's calculator and seeing how much they might be able to borrow.
Well, I think we do refer to borrowing strategy and the importance to it quite a lot in the things that we talk about, and we certainly encourage people to be very careful who they choose to use as a mortgage broker, someone who's prepared to think long term. And it's about getting that relationship in place, and so things are set up well, as opposed to just chasing interest rates. So that's really at the heart of it. So if you haven't sort of familiarized yourself with that concept of borrowing strategy, go back to episode 9. Our next one is, do you want to go?
Episode 41.
41.
6 things we wish we knew before buying our first property. Now, this is actually quite fun for us to do because we're poking a bit of fun at ourselves. Some of the mistakes that we made when we bought our first properties. So it is a bit of fun, but there's a serious undertone, as there always is. And that's, we believe if we can give you the information, then you can avoid the avoidable mistakes, or you can put yourself so far ahead of the other buyers in a competitive market if you are educated and you know what to avoid, how to do things, the right order to do things in, and get yourself to the finish line before other people beat you to it. So that was and still continues to be highly downloaded, that episode. I wish I'd had one of those when I first quit.
And we tell you our stories, and we make classic mistakes that we see a lot of people make. But because we're now both property experts, we now had decades of experience on in the professional side of being a real estate agent and being a buyer's agent. We can then look at those mistakes with an expert's head and go, right, this is the ideal way of doing things. And it's not like, well, that didn't work. What would have been better? We're not stabbing in the dark. We actually know best practice now, whereas back then we had no idea. And also the funny thing is a lot of people make mistakes with property that they don't realize they made a mistake. If they made some money, they never sort of think, well, was that good, bad, or
how does
or
it compare?
indifferent?
What's the benchmark?
Yeah, exactly. And so, but we now know. We know that even though we both made money from our first properties, we know we left money on the table.
Yeah,
and so
definitely.
That episode really tells you how not to.
Yes, it's a little bit of insight into our pasts as enthusiastic and ambitious women.
Yes.
Episode 59 is the quick step-by-step guide to purchasing property, and there's no doubt that we did this because we wanted to open people's minds to the fact that there is a process, that there are steps, and they need to be taken in the right order. And I remember we had a student in our beta group who gave us some awesome feedback on a number of different things, and he said to me, the biggest takeaway for me was I was doing step 2, 7, 3, 8. He said I was continuously doing it out of order, and I was never getting anywhere because I wasn't getting the order right. And he said once I got the order right and the steps in the right order, he said it fell into place for me because I could logically move myself towards the right outcome. And I always think back to that feedback, and I find that really valuable.
Yeah, it's amazing actually, because people like shortcuts. Right? Everyone wants to know the easy way of doing things. And the framework actually makes doing the difficult easier. And so you have to do the difficult. You have to learn how to actually do it properly if you don't want to make huge mistakes. But that framework really just puts it into context for you, so you're not bumbling around and you're not accidentally missing things, and you're not sort of head spinning thinking, I just really don't know what I'm doing
now?
But I should know. And that's the thing too, or turning to people that don't know, and then it's the blind leading the blind. So that's where we give you that really lay it out for you and make it really easy. All right, our next popular episode was episode 40. As Meighan said, we're bouncing around the place here. We went 41, 59, now to 40. And that is, how can you identify A, B, and C grade properties? And we do talk about this a lot.
True.
And so if you're thinking, I don't quite know, what do they mean by that? Go and listen to episode 40, because really your success in future, in terms of your financial future, hinges so many ways on you buying a really good asset for your first home. So really just understanding that A, B, and C grade properties is just such a foundational step for you.
It is, and it's something that we talk about a lot with students in Campfire on a Wednesday. So when a student brings a property to us that they are seriously interested in, and they're looking for guidance on, making sure they've done the pricing property, making sure they've ticked all the due diligence, making sure that they're putting their negotiation strategy together well, we do talk about and we pull apart the A, B, and C grade aspects of the properties. And it's a really good reflective sort of opportunity for them to think about, all right, well, I was a little bit, I had my rose-coloured glasses on and I didn't really see that, but now I can see that that's an issue. And so being able to identify, understand, and be a little bit removed from the emotion is really important, and having a framework to do that allows you to step back and say, okay, well, I've fallen in love with it. Now I need to step back and have a really analytical look at it.
Yeah, 100%. And also there's a temptation, particularly when it's a tough market, if it's a really hard market to buy in, there is a temptation for buyers to try to go for the easy property to buy because you want to be put out of your pain, right? And also as first home buyers, you're not on the ladder and you're worried that we'll never get on the ladder, and there's all that sort of fear that's driving you. And the problem is that the property that's easy to buy is often a C grade property, which means that it's going to hamstring you in terms of capital growth, but also be really difficult for you to sell when you go to sell it down the track. It's one of our tenets.
Number 4. Number 4 in our home buying principles is if it's easy to buy, it's probably difficult to sell. And that's not exactly the equation you want.
No, and easy to buy is usually C grade. So these things are all linked together. So that's why that's such an important episode. Right, our next one, 105.
It's 105, and it's Your First Home Buyer Guide Quick Start. So really this is a bit of an overview of what Your First Home Buyer Guide, the course, actually is. And people really like it because it gives them a little taster to what the steps are, which is no secret. We talk about the 10 steps all the time. Of course, there's a lot of depth below each of those 10 steps.
Yes.
But the quick start guide is really, I think a lot of people sort of look at that and go, oh, right, okay, I really now know what I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. What I do hope is that people don't go, oh, good, I've got the quick start guide, now I'm good. Because there's so much more.
Possibly. There's some people that
so
think
much
that.
more.
That's not the intention. But one that I really enjoyed doing, and I think that a lot of listeners obviously really enjoy as well, is episode 121, which is tips for dealing with real estate agents. Now, it's really easy for people to go, oh, that it's so difficult, and it's not really that difficult if you understand where motivations are. Real estate agents are coming in contact with buyers all the time, and you've got to be the person that they want to do business with, not the person that they do not want to pick up the phone to. And that was really sort of, one of the underlying things of, they're your conduit to the seller and to the opportunity to buy the property. So those tips and how to deal with them and get the best out of the interactions, I really enjoyed that episode and delivering that information.
Yeah, I mean, real estate agents often speak a different language too. As actually sitting in a meeting with a client of mine, we're helping sell a property. So we do a lot of vendor advisory work, and was sitting in the meeting with the sales agent and the client. And it was hilarious because this agent was talking in that sort of real estate-y jargon talk. It's not even real language. It's a bit weird. But I kept having a bit of a little giggle to myself, and the client afterwards like, what's that guy on? And he was the sidekick, like the real agent that we'd engaged was a really, he was really on it. But this guy just felt like he had to keep talking, and he was just talking this jargon.
Proving himself.
And and they do that. And he obviously is insecure, And so you just think, he's strutting around with his fancy clothes and his fancy watch and all that sort of stuff. He's actually insecure. He's a human being, and he's just a little bit insecure, and he's using all his language. And I think from my point of view, it's a nice little reminder that, they are the conduit. They're very important, that as buyers, they're our barrier to the seller. And so we've got to remember they're human beings. They have anxieties and dreams and all this stuff like we do. And even though sometimes they come across with this weird language, like this guy was just quite off-putting, but he's a human being. And that episode is really about tips to get to the human being and to get where you want, get where you want to be through that human being.
It's also, the amount of times that I've sort of come into contact with buyers who have said, I will not buy off that agent. And you kind of go, yeah, but if they've got the property that you want, you're going to buy off that agent. So you need to sort of adjust your thought processes around who you will and won't as a buyer. You only have control over who is the agent when you are the seller of the property, not when you're the buyer of the property.
Very true.
So you've got to adjust your thinking on that one.
It's a really good point. All right. And our last episode in our top, is it 10?
Well, 10, 11.
Is top so many, we're a bit loose on this one, is episode 27. So no particular order, we're back to episode 27. And this is I'm so glad that this is actually up in the top, the top bunch.
Yeah.
How to work out the right price to pay. Now, you probably know we have a free mini course that you can download whenever you want, which the link's in the show notes here, which teaches you how to price a property like a professional.
Yeah.
And how that episode 27 sort of I guess is a little bit of an addendum to that, or an added dimension to that, because I am still horrified when I ask people, and this is in my buyer's agency business as well as first home buyers, how have you worked out the price to make an offer? And so few people actually have a really good method of doing this, and we teach you for free.
There is a method.
There is a
method. Yeah, you don't have to guess. You don't have to just rely on the agent's guide, or in Queensland, no guide.
Yeah.
There is a method, and working out the right price to pay is really empowering. and it puts you really in control.
In fact, Queensland's a perfect example of it where you really, really need it, because the buyers in other states where you do get a price guide, they make the error, and this is really often, and if you've made this error, you'll know this, is that they'll just add 10% often to the guide, and that is absolutely flawed. So if you want to know why it's flawed and how to do it better, then you should download the free mini course and listen to that episode.
Absolutely. Now, without doubt, our proudest achievement are our students who tell us that they had a really strong upper hand against other buyers because of the knowledge they gained when they did your first home buyer guide. Now, that to me tells me that they were able to differentiate themselves and be in a position of control and authority with humility to actually get their deal across the line before any other buyer or ahead of any other buyer. And I think that's, for me, that feeling of giving people empowerment and giving them knowledge and giving them guidance so that they can get to that position. Because at the end of the day, it is a competition with other buyers in most markets at the moment in late 2024, and has been for a number of years. So you have to find out how to get the edge to be the one that isn't paying $100,000 more than everybody else, but is sharp enough in your pricing, has the best negotiation strategy, has the right auction toolkit, bidding toolkit, to actually get ahead of the other buyers and be a homeowner.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that a lot of feedback we get, which I'm super proud about, is that a lot of overthinkers and overanalyzers do our course. And so you could think, oh yeah, well of course they do, because then they're likely to buy courses, right? But no, these are the people that tend to consume every single podcast episode and then try to organize it for themselves. They've got notebooks that are full, right, of all the things that they've learned. And so many of them will say, God, I was trying to do it myself. I was trying to, assimilate all this knowledge. I was listening to your stuff. I was reading other stuff, listening to other podcasts. And then when they do the course, they're like, oh, it all just dropped into place. It all made perfect sense. I didn't have to overthink the way to do things because it's so laid out. And then when I followed that process, I felt so confident that I hadn't missed anything. And that's the big thing that overthinkers worry about. They think, is there something I've missed? And that feedback, I think, from self-diagnosed overthinkers, for me, I just think is a fantastic thing for us to be really proud of.
Right. So there's our 200th episode. Thank you for being part of our community and listening and downloading and taking the knowledge in and using it in the best way for yourself. Now, if you haven't already joined our Facebook group, it's called Your First Home Buyer Guide Australia, and it is your opportunity to connect with us and ask us questions. You'll get answers from us, which means that you can be sure you're not going to be led down the garden path.
Exactly. And even if we do have a VA, an assistant named Julie, who does post some of those answers, but we wrote them.
We wrote them, yeah.
We wrote them. So we post them, plus she posts them, but they're our answers to your questions. Now, a quick note that you might think, as I mentioned earlier, that we cover everything that you need to know in these podcasts, but a sad, sad truth is we don't. And it's not that sad, really, because buying property is complex, right? We're just scratching the surface on these podcasts. If you really want to be an educated first home buyer, you do need to learn all of the steps and how to do everything in the right order, which will give you the confidence to move forward.
It's depth of knowledge, yeah. Our first home buyer guide course only costs $990 and you get direct access to us to help guide you through your negotiations. I mentioned Campfire earlier. Every Wednesday, live access for an hour to go through properties or negotiations or pricing or whatever you want. You can share the link of a property you're thinking of buying and we can help you work out whether it's an A, B or C grade or an absolute no-go zone. Trust me, you'll buy better with our guidance and you'll overpay by a lot more than $1,000 if you don't know what you're doing. In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out Your First Home Buyer Guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.